An unwritten rule in the NFL dictates that blood and bruises buy respect, but a silent mutiny in Cleveland is about to obliterate that century-old hierarchy forever. As a fifth-round rookie sitting on the bench, Shedeur Sanders just shattered Tom Brady's all-time record by pulling in $17.7 million off the field. Imagine bleeding on every snap for $3 million while your backup makes $20 million without taking a single hit, creating a toxic wealth gap this culture cannot survive. For the first time ever, a bench player holds more leverage than his head coach and front office combined, rendering traditional authority completely obsolete. When a young quarterback throwing 10 interceptions earns more of pure clout than the veteran lineman protecting his life, locker room chemistry doesn't just fracture, it detonates. This is the terrifying blueprint of how Gen Z wealth is about to rip professional football apart at the seams. To fully grasp the magnitude of the seismic shift taking place inside the Cleveland Browns facility, you have to look past the superficial headlines and examine the cold, hard numbers on paper. On paper, Shedeur Sanders entered the National Football League through the narrowest of financial doorways. Drafted in the fifth round, his official player contract represents standard rookie-scale compensation, locking him into a baseline salary hovering around $1.03 million annually. In any normal era of professional sports, that baseline salary dictates a young athlete's status, forcing them into a state of quiet obedience, heavy learning, and humble deference to the veterans who have earned their keep through years of physical attrition. Yet, the moment the NFL Players Association published its latest official group licensing report, the established reality of professional football crashed headfirst into an unprecedented anomaly. Tucked within those official documents was a staggering, almost unfathomable figure. Shedeur Sanders had pulled in $17.7 million in NFLPA group licensing revenues alone during his rookie campaign. To put that figure into proper perspective, you have to look at the towering legends who built the modern game. At the peak of his global popularity, unmatched success, and 7 Super Bowl victories, Tom Brady held the previous all-time record for single-year group licensing income at $9.5 million. Shedeur Sanders, while sitting on the bench for the vast majority of his inaugural season, virtually doubled the high water mark of the greatest quarterback to ever play the sport. This is where the mathematical reality turns into an existential crisis for the franchise. You are looking at a rookie quarterback who generated nearly $18 million purely from his name, image, personal branding, and merchandise sales, completely detached from his actual productivity on the gridiron. When you stack that off-field empire on top of his base salary, his total annual intake utterly dwarfs the compensation packages of nearly every established veteran sharing the locker room with him. The paradox is as jarring as it is novel. A developmental athlete occupying a backup spot on the depth chart is pulling in the kind of astronomical income usually reserved for elite, top-tier franchise quarterbacks in the prime of their careers. This financial dynamic creates a deeply unsettling question that coaches, general managers, and sports psychologists have never had to answer until now. What actually happens inside an NFL locker room when a backup quarterback, a player who has yet to prove he can consistently read professional defenses or win big games, makes exponentially more cash off the field than 90% of the veteran starters blocking for him? In a sport built on violent sacrifice, where offensive linemen throw their bodies into collisions on every single snap for a fraction of that income, how does a team maintain order? The traditional power structures of professional football were forged on the concept of earned authority. When that authority is completely bypassed by modern digital clout and off-field brand dominance, the structural foundation of the entire sport begins to groan under the weight of an invisible, highly volatile tension. To understand why this financial anomaly is so inherently explosive, you have to realize that an NFL locker room is not a corporate office. It is a brutal, hyper-fragile meritocracy bound by an unspoken sacred code. For over a century, locker room hierarchy was forged through physical sacrifice, seniority, and on-field execution. Respect was a currency you earned by absorbing bone-crushing hits, playing through torn ligaments, and standing tall under the blinding lights of Sunday afternoons. The unwritten law of the gridiron dictated that the highest-paid players were the undisputed generals of the team, earned through years of blood, sweat, and proven production. Offense and defense captains, battle-tested veterans, and elite edge rushers held the moral authority to command the room, demand discipline, and check anyone who stepped out of line. Shedeur Sanders did not just break that rule set, he completely annihilated it. Through his global SS2 legendary brand equity, aggressive social media footprint, and unprecedented merchandise empire, Sanders built a commercial apparatus that operates completely independent of traditional NFL meritocracy. While sitting as a fifth-round developmental backup, his off-field earnings exploded into the $20 million realm purely through personal branding and culture-shifting digital dominance. He achieved the ultimate financial holy grail of sports without having to prove he could consistently complete a three-step drop or win a divisional matchup late in the fourth quarter. Now, consider the psychological powder keg this creates inside the Cleveland locker room. Picture a veteran offensive tackle or a defensive captain who has spent 6 or 7 seasons subjecting his body to microtraumas and concussive collisions. These men are taking massive physical punishment, dragging themselves to the training room every morning, and playing through torn cartilage to earn $3 to $8 million a year. They are the structural pillars of the football team, the very men tasked with keeping the young quarterback alive in the pocket. Yet every single day they walk into the facility, they are forced to look at a second-year backup making 4 times their annual income without taking a single brutal blow on Sunday. Historically, when a veteran spoke, a rookie listened. If a young player showed up late or lacked preparation, the veteran leaders would enforce locker room justice, knowing their status and paycheck gave them the clout to hold people accountable. But how does a 7-year veteran making $4 million enforce discipline on a backup making over $20 million? You cannot pull rank on a player whose personal brand dwarfs the entire operational budget of your positional unit. The traditional levers of locker room social control completely collapse because economic standing has been totally decoupled from physical sacrifice on the gridiron. This dynamic strips away the fundamental incentive structure that keeps 53 men working toward a common goal. When global fame and multi-million-dollar endorsement empires can be secured purely through social clout rather than winning football games, the cultural foundation of the sport fractures. The offensive line isn't just protecting a quarterback anymore. They are insulating an independent media conglomerate whose financial success is entirely detached from their own well-being. Shedeur's brand equity bypassed the NFL's traditional hierarchy overnight, creating an unprecedented dynamic where social media clout carries more weight than veteran sweat equity. The hierarchy isn't just shifting, it is fundamentally broken. An unprecedented wealth gap inside an NFL locker room does not merely generate quiet resentment among players, it fundamentally reshapes organizational dynamics, destabilizes leadership, and strips front offices of their structural authority. In traditional NFL operations, the front office holds all the cards over developmental talent and backup players. A standard 5th-round pick is entirely dependent on his team's salary, game day active bonuses, and the goodwill of the coaching staff to achieve long-term financial security. That dependency gives the head coach and general manager total disciplinary leverage. If a young player steps out of line, displays poor body language, or questions tactical decisions, his roster spot and future earning potential are immediately placed in jeopardy. With Shedeur Sanders, that corporate leverage completely evaporates. When a backup quarterback commands an off-field income streams generating nearly $20 million annually, the traditional power dynamic between employer and employee is utterly inverted. A fine from the coaching staff or the threat of a benching holds zero psychological weight over a player who is earning double-digit millions independently of his playing status. He is not fighting for his financial survival, nor is he beholden to management for his generational wealth. This reality introduces an unprecedented psychological friction inside the building, a coaching staff attempting to enforce rigid operational control over a young athlete who possesses greater independent brand power and financial independence than the entire executive floor combined. This internal friction is made exponentially more volatile when set against the backdrop of Cleveland's quarterback room, where two completely antithetical economic paradigms are actively colliding. On one side of the film room sits Deshaun Watson, representing the absolute pinnacle of traditional front office overcommitment, a fully guaranteed $230 million contract that tied the franchise's fate to a single player's on-field performance. On the other side sits Shedeur Sanders, representing the new wave of athlete entrepreneurship, holding an off-field brand fortune that rivals Watson's annual salary despite operating under a minimal rookie-scale contract. The contrast creates a surreal, high-stakes battleground for team identity. You have a veteran starter anchored by an unprecedented legacy contract that management cannot easily escape, sharing a room with a young backup whose off-field empire makes him essentially untouchable to traditional team discipline. Analysts, former players, and media commentators surrounding the franchise are constantly picking apart this bizarre structural dynamic. The front office finds itself trapped in a double bind. They cannot exert classic contractual leverage over Sanders, nor can they justify benching or insulating Watson without acknowledging the complete failure of their traditional investment model. As this silent tension simmers through every team meeting and practice, the fundamental nature of authority inside the facility undergoes a radical shift. Traditional NFL management operates on the assumption that money buys compliance, but when an athlete brings his own empire into the building, the coach's whistle loses its authority. The franchise becomes a house divided between two radically different eras of sports wealth, the traditional fully guaranteed team contract versus the sovereign creator-led athletic brand, leaving the head coach and front office scrambling to maintain control over a room where the rules of leverage have been permanently rewritten. All the marketing power, viral fame, and record-shattering group licensing numbers in the world eventually hit an unyielding brick wall, the harsh, unfiltered film tape of Sunday afternoon. Money can buy global influence, pristine public relations, and social media dominance, but it cannot buy completed passes against a zero blitz, nor can it buy protection from a closing edge rusher. When you strip away the dazzling off-field status, the brand deals, and the astronomical revenue figures, Shedeur Sanders' year-one reality check on the football field presents a stark, unsettling contrast. Step inside the film room, where cold analytics replace internet hype, and the tape tells an unflattering story. In his rookie campaign, Sanders posted a modest 3-4 record as a starter across 8 appearances. He logged 1,400 passing yards, managed 7 touchdown passes, and threw 10 costly interceptions, ending the year with a sub-60% completion rate and a passer rating that hovered near the bottom of qualified starters across the league. Evaluators and rival coordinators saw a young quarterback struggling with NFL speed, taking unnecessary sacks, and misreading coverage rotation under pressure. These are expected growing pains for any fifth-round developmental rookie thrust into action, but Sanders is no ordinary fifth-round pick. He carries the public footprint and compensation package of an elite superstar, creating a massive, dangerous disconnect between his actual on-field output and his commercial standing. This discrepancy is precisely where team chemistry faces its most lethal test. In professional sports, a locker room will gladly tolerate eccentricities, massive paychecks, and loud personal brands, provided the player is delivering victories on the field. Winning covers up a multitude of structural flaws. It smooths over pay disparities, pacifies veteran egos, and aligns the entire organization behind a shared purpose. But when a team enters a losing streak, the grace period vanishes overnight. When the offense stalls, drives die on third down failures, and interceptions pile up, resentments that were previously suppressed immediately rise to the surface. Imagine the psychological atmosphere in the film room during a Monday morning review after a blowout loss. The head coach is breaking down costly turnovers, pointing out missed reads, and highlighting mechanical errors. Veteran players, whose livelihoods, bonus incentives, and body longevity depend on execution, look at the tape and see a young passer struggling with basic fundamentals. Then they step out into the hallway and see that same backup quarterback featured on nationwide ad campaigns, flexing multi-million-dollar endorsement deals and trending across social media platforms for his latest lifestyle drop. The contrast becomes unbearable. The silent thought in every veteran's mind begins to echo loudly. Why is the player producing the least amount of winning football receiving the vast majority of the rewards and attention? This dynamic breeds a toxic environment where accountability breaks down completely. If an athlete's off-field financial engine is humming along at nearly $20 million a year, regardless of whether he throws 2 touchdowns or 3 interceptions, the traditional fear of failure loses its edge. Teammates begin to question whether the young star is truly obsessed with mastering the playbook or if his football career is merely a secondary content generator for his primary branding empire. During a high-stress season, that erosion of trust destroys team unity. If off-field earnings continue to dramatically outpace on-field performance, the locker room divides into cynical factions. Veterans check out mentally, offensive linemen lose their edge, and the coaching staff's authority crumbles under the weight of an uncoachable dynamic. The brutal reality of the NFL remains unchanged. Social clout does not move the chains on third and long. When the bright lights of Sunday fade and the film doesn't lie, an empire built on off-field millions without on-field execution isn't a success story. It is an explosive recipe for organizational collapse. Act 5, the climax and future blueprint. Whether traditional NFL owners, legacy head coaches, or old-school football purists are willing to accept it, the seismic disruption unfolding in Cleveland is not an isolated anomaly. It is the opening salvo of an unstoppable revolution. Shedeur Sanders is not merely a polarizing quarterback navigation through a turbulent start to his professional career. He is the definitive prototype for the Gen Z superstar athlete. For over a century, the National Football League operated as a closed-loop feudal system where billionaire owners held an absolute monopoly over athlete monetization and career trajectory. Players were expected to keep their heads down, absorb life-altering physical trauma, and view their team salary as the sole financial engine of their existence. That archaic paradigm has officially been shattered beyond repair. The blueprint Shedeur Sanders has executed represents a fundamental paradigm shift in how elite talent approaches professional sports. By leveraging name, image, and likeness opportunities in college, cultivating a direct-to-consumer digital audience through the SS2 legendary enterprise, and retaining control over his personal media infrastructure, Sanders entered the league as a fully sovereign corporate entity. He did not arrive in Cleveland as a helpless employee waiting for the team to define his worth. He arrived as an established global media brand that happened to play quarterback. When a fifth-round rookie can leverage his digital ecosystem to shatter Tom Brady's all-time licensing record and pocket nearly $20 million off the field, the old rules of corporate leverage cease to exist. This dynamic marks the absolute death of traditional front office intimidation. In the legacy NFL, general managers controlled young players through contract structure, roster security, and the implicit threat of cutting off their livelihood. Today, an elite young athlete armed with a massive personal brand possesses an independent financial fortress that no team executive can touch or dismantle. If a franchise threatens to bench or trade him, his off-field revenue engine keeps humming without missing a beat. If a coaching staff demands compliance through financial fines, those penalties amount to pocket change against his independent commercial income. The power balance has swung decisively away from the front office boardroom and into the hands of the athlete content creator. This structural evolution is forcing 32 NFL ownership groups into an existential reckoning. Front offices across the country are watching Cleveland with a mixture of fascination and outright terror, realizing that every major college prospect entering the draft over the next decade will be following the Sanders blueprint. Future quarterbacks will no longer enter the league dependent on standard rookie wage scales. They will arrive with equity stakes, independent media networks, and global consumer brands already fully operational. They will command off-field earnings that eclipse their team contracts before they ever drop back to throw a single pass in preseason action. The ripple effects will permanently alter how franchises are managed, how contracts are negotiated, and how locker rooms are built. Team front offices will be forced to evolve from top-down authoritarian structures into collaborative joint ventures, learning how to partner with sovereign athlete creators rather than attempting to control them. Traditional contract negotiations will no longer center solely on guaranteed money or signing bonuses, but on brand alignment, digital distribution rights, and media integration. The old-school locker room hierarchy, where authority was measured exclusively by veteran tenure and team paychecks, will be forced to adapt to a reality where social capital, creator equity, and global influence carry equal weight. Ultimately, Shedeur Sanders' saga in Cleveland is the herald of a brand new era in professional sports. The friction inside the Browns building is not just a temporary disturbance, it is the friction of tectonic plates shifting beneath the foundation of the entire league. The traditional NFL structure was designed to control players by making the game their sole financial pipeline. Gen Z athlete entrepreneurship has permanently severed that dependency, creating a new class of athlete executives who hold the keys to their own multi-million-dollar empires. Traditionalists can decry the loss of old-school locker room culture all they want, but the economic tide has turned. The future of professional football belongs to the athletes who own their media, dictate their value, and command their destiny long before they ever step onto the field.